Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government what progress it has made in ensuring that 10% of frontline NHS spending is on mental health services.
Minister Tom Arthur.
We continue to work with NHS boards and IGBs towards delivery of the commitment that at least 10% of frontline health spending will be dedicated to mental health by the end of this parliamentary session. The latest available cost book data confirmed that NHS expenditure on mental health has increased by £179.6 million to £1.486 billion in 2023-24. That is 9.03% of total net expenditure, up from 8.53% in 2022-23. Whilst we remain committed to the delivery of the target, as we all know, there are continued and unprecedented challenges to the public finances. Despite those pressures, since 2006, mental health spending across the NHS has doubled in cash terms, from £651 million in 2006-07 to over £1.49 billion in 2023-24.
Rhoda Grant.
The Scottish Government pledged that boards should spend 1% of their budget on child and adolescent mental health services. And I understand only one board has achieved that, while NHS Highland is only spending 0.37% of their budget on CAMHS. Yet young people are spending years of their childhood on waiting lists, and others are being rejected from the service altogether. Can I ask, when will all boards fulfil this pledge, and when will lengthy CAMHS waiting times be dealt with?
Minister.
Well, I want to acknowledge the significant progress that has been made on CAMHS waiting times, as members will be aware, this year. Specifically on the points of NHS Highland, I am aware of that and have been discussing the matter actively. My officials have been engaged on the matter, and I want to confirm to the member I will be meeting with NHS Highland in the near future and all of the other territorial health boards, because I want to ensure that we can work constructively and in partnership to make sure all of our health boards are meeting those spending targets.
Brief supplementary, Colin Beattie.
Can the Minister outline how the Scottish Budget, which Ms Grant and her colleagues didn't even engage with, let alone vote for, provides record funding for mental health services across Scotland, and how will this benefit thousands across Scotland to access crucial services?
Minister.
As I set out in my initial response, since 2006, mental health spending by NHS Scotland has more than doubled in cash terms, and the most recent figures show that spend was £1.486 billion in 23-24. Mental health is an absolute priority for this government, and even in the context of the past few difficult financial years, we have continued to invest wisely. That is evidenced by statistics showing that we have the best national performance ever recorded for CAMHS waiting times, and we have record numbers of staff providing more varied mental health support and services to a larger number of people than ever before.
Rennie.
But working towards, when there's only 1 year to go before the end of this government's term in office, is just not good enough. Fife is well down the league table in terms of spending on mental health and on CAMHS, and the effect on other services is dramatic, whether it's the police and on the economy, with lots of people unable to work because this government can't give them the support they need. When is there going to be a renewed focus on making sure mental health is the priority that it deserves to be?
Minister.
I recognise the seriousness of the issues that Mr McRennie raises, and I want to assure him that less than 24 hours in post, I have been actively engaging with my officials to take these matters forward. We have seen an increase in spending on frontline mental health services. That much I've already referred to in my original answers. I recognise and appreciate that there is variation that exists between boards. That is ultimately something that is going to be part of any complex system as we're dealing with. But as I set out in my original answer to Rhoda Grant, I'm committed to meeting with all boards over the course of the summer, because I want to make sure we are all collectively across Scotland working to meet those spending targets by the end of this parliamentary session.
There is much interest in this session. I'd be grateful for concise questions and responses, and I call Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government when GP vaccination services will be fully restored to GPs in NHS Highland, in the light of reported concerns that the proposed hybrid model is less safe and more expensive.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Officer, in general, the model of Health Board has been responsible for delivering vaccinations is working well across Scotland, but I recognise the need for flexibility to account for specific circumstances that might negatively affect vaccine uptake, such as the areas I have discussed at various junctures with Mr Ewing. That is why I have agreed to Highland Health and Social Care Partnership, putting in place a mixed model. Oversight of how that is developed and deployed to deliver local and accessible vaccination services in a safe and cost-effective way will ultimately remain the responsibility of Highland HSCP, with input and support from local GPs, practice managers, Public Health Scotland and the Scottish Government.
Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, over the past 3 to 4 years, I've raised with the Cabinet Secretary and his two predecessors that a GP-run service would save millions of pounds a year, a fact that the Cabinet Secretary appears to ignore. And more important, it will be safer because, as the Cabinet Secretary well knows, we've already lost the life of one infant because of the negligence of the NHS centralised system. So, given the concerns that this will not even now be returned to GPs for this winter, will the Cabinet Secretary intervene and demand that NHS Highlands return this service to GPs before any more damage and unsafety is caused to patients in my constituency in the Highlands?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Fergus Ewing for his question. I have listened to the interactions that we have had, the testimony that has been provided by him and the GPs that he represents, and have taken action as a result. I'm concerned by the narration that Mr Ewing has put forward at the conclusion of his question around the pace at which this is moving at, and I'd be more than happy to check in again with the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership to ensure that the necessary pace, effectiveness and safety of the system is paramount.
Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've always joined with Fergus Ewing calling for vaccinations to be returned to Highland GPs. But NHS Highland seems to believe that the only place to deliver services is in Raigmore, which is why they've also pulled enhanced GP services across the Highlands. Surely the answer to this problem, Cabinet Secretary, is because NHS Highland cannot manage their finances and appear to be £50 million in debt already by the end of the year, that they should be put in special measures because of these issues.
Cabinet Secretary.
We continue to work with all boards, including NHS Highland, on their financial position. We keep those positions under review, and I know Mr Mountain has an interest, as does Mr Ewing, in the position around vaccination services in Highland. I'm happy to continue to interact with him on that basis to ensure the effective, safe delivery of vaccinations in Highland is achieved, and I'll ensure I keep in touch with Mr Ewing and Mr Mountain to that end.
Question number 3, Michael Marra.
The Scottish Government, what assessment it has made of the impact of the reduction in Scottish Attainment Challenge funding for Dundee City Council?
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
Since the inception of the Scottish Attainment Challenge in 2015, Dundee and its schools have received a total of £86.7 million. In refreshing the Scottish Attainment Challenge in 2022 to introduce strategic equity funding, the Scottish Government prioritised ensuring that funding was distributed equitably to all 32 local authorities, recognising that poverty exists in every local authority in Scotland. In taking that decision, an equality impact assessment was undertaken and published at the time. The change in distribution was developed in close consultation with local government and agreed to by COSLA, and that has taken place over 4 years, enabling challenge authorities to transition to their equitable share of CEF over time.
Michael Marra.
Several constituents have contacted me as their jobs as health and wellbeing workers in Dundee schools are being cut. They're set to lose their jobs despite years of service at the end of this school term. So in 2021, when the SNP didn't just refresh but cut Dundee's Attainment Challenge funding, I warned that that decision would inflict callous cuts on the poorest children in the poorest areas in Scotland. So what does the Cabinet Secretary have to say to my constituents who have provided such vital support to some of the most vulnerable young people in Scotland for a decade? Will she speak to her colleagues in Dundee City Council and stop these senseless and damaging cuts?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I do recall that Mr Marra made commentary at the time in that regard. He said, of course, back in May of 2022, we all recognise that there is what you might call hidden poverty in every community. He also said at the Education Committee in May 2022, he appeared to welcome this shift. He said it's good that the money is now available to local authorities. Fife are up £2 million. And across the piece, of course, we know that throughout the duration of the Scottish Attainment Challenge until 24-25, Dundee had been allocated over £43 million in both challenge authority and strategic equity funding. And I go back to my original point, Presiding Officer, that the ask to move our approach in relation to this funding was an ask directly from local government, which Mr Marra appeared to welcome at the time. I'm more than happy to have my officials engage with officials in Dundee City Council to the substantive point that I think the member was making.
Thank you. Question 4 is not lodged. Question number 5, Foysol Choudhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it is working to ensure that schools are tackling racism and racist bullying.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm clear that there is no place for racism in our schools. Incidents of discrimination or prejudice must be addressed whenever they arise, and it is important that we are vigilant in challenging any racist behaviour in Scotland's schools. In November, we published updated anti-bullying guidance, Respect for All, which included guidance on responding to prejudice-based bullying. The Scottish Government will publish new guidance for schools on responding to racist incidents, including guidance on recording and monitoring in the coming weeks. This has been developed in partnership by the Racism and Racist Incidents Workstream of the Anti-Racism in Education programme.
Foysol Choudhury.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for the answer. I recently heard the story of Marra. She was forced to remove her daughter, Anissa, from school after months of racist bullying. Despite reporting the incident and receiving an apology from the bully, records were not held. No follow-up work was done and the bullying continued. There are many anti-racist toolkits, but can the Cabinet Secretary tell me how the Scottish Government is ensuring these are actually put into practice, and will she meet with me and ACTA to hear directly about the impact of racism on children?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm happy to give Mr Choudhury that undertaking. I'm more than happy to meet with him and his constituent additionally. We know there are challenges in Scotland schools post-pandemic in relation to racism and other incidents being recorded particularly, and of course that speaks to some of the wider work that we are undertaking that will publish before this term ends in relation to recording and monitoring. The Bullying and Equalities module on CMIS, the Schools Management Information System, has a specific recording category for incidents where race was a factor, and CMIS also enables us to record where racism intersects with other forms of prejudice. But I'm more than happy to engage with Mr Choudhury on this point, and I hope he will take some heart from the updated guidance which we'll publish before the end of this term.
Question number 6, Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the recently published report from the review body on doctors' and dentists' remuneration, which provides pay recommendations for doctors and dentists for the financial year 2025-26.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, Agenda for Change trade unions, which includes nurses and midwives, have unanimously accepted a 2-year pay deal of 4.25% and 3.75%. The Independent Doctors and Dentists Pay Review Body has recommended a UK-wide 4% pay uplift for NHS medical and dental staff, and I intend to accept the DDRB's recommendations. This excludes resident doctors with whom I will hold direct talks in the coming weeks. This will see, for instance, consultants' salary increases of between £4,286 and £5,695, and means at the top of their scale a consultant will earn a basic pay of more than £148,000.
Colette Stevenson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. I am proud that Scotland is the only part of the UK where both GPs and dentists have seen real terms growth in their wages in recent years, and I am hopeful that this will drive recruitment in the sectors as we continue to improve access to healthcare across Scotland. However, the UK Labour Government's reckless increase to employer national insurance is hitting GP and dental practices hard. Can the Cabinet Secretary therefore please advise what discussions the Scottish Government has had with the UK Government regarding damaging Westminster policies like this, and can he outline how the Scottish Government will work with stakeholders to retain and recruit health professionals in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Local Government has raised the increase in employer national insurance contributions repeatedly with UK Treasury ministers and pressed for the additional cost to public services here in Scotland to be fully funded. This is having a profound impact now across Scottish public services, paying for a UK government tax rise. That's our GPs, it's our social care services, our voluntary sector partners, all paying for UK government decisions. So it is incredibly disappointing that the Chancellor has yet again failed to do this in the recent spending review, and we will of course have to consider the implications of that as we continue to deliver services for the people of Scotland.
Question number 7, Daniel Johnson.
The Scottish Government, in light of the Strategic Defence Review's emphasis on a whole-society approach to national security, what discussions it has had with the UK Government regarding work to contribute to a comprehensive national resilience strategy?
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to confirm that there has been ministerial and official engagement before and since the launch of the UK Strategic Defence Review. Defence policy is of course reserved, but the security and safety of people in Scotland is a top priority for this Government, and that's why we've taken an active and a constructive role in the Strategic Defence Review process. From its initial stages last year, where the First Minister wrote to Lord Robertson, who led the review on the 30th of September 2024, with the Scottish Government's response to the propositions posed by the SDR reviewers, through to the ministerial discussions that took place in the days before and since the SDR was published on the 3rd of June.
Daniel Johnson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. What is clear is the Strategic Defence Review is far more comprehensive and wide-ranging than probably any defence review we've had in the last 25 years. And there are clear recommendations that have implications in devolved areas. We've heard in recent days arguments and points around industrial strategy, but actually civil contingency is really a clear concern, with recommendations around coordination between civil and military authorities, such as local authorities, health, police, and clearly devolved government. So I would be grateful if the Cabinet Secretary could outline what discussions it has had, both with military authorities but also UK Government, to set up the structures required to undertake that civil contingency work.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I give Daniel Johnson the assurance that efforts are underway to optimise relations which will ensure resilience is maximised? And this requires developing existing and emerging relationships between the UK Government, devolved administrations and a range of agencies and departments. And I'd like to give Daniel Johnson the confidence that this is being progressed and that there is a shared interest in doing so, and I'll be happy to update him on that progress.
Question number 8, Jackie Baillie.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the reasons for there being more private hospital admissions in 2024 than in any previous year on record, according to recent private healthcare information network data.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. While a patient has the right at any time to exercise choice and seek private treatment, we recognise that excessively long waits for NHS treatment are not acceptable. That's why we're determined to reduce patient waits in the year ahead, and our investment of £106 million of additional funding will help us to deliver more than 150,000 extra appointments and procedures in 2025-26. This includes £25 million for orthopaedics and more than £12 million for ophthalmology. This funding is just part of our record investment of £21.7 billion for health and social care this year, which will expand capacity and reduce waiting times.
Jackie Baillie.
Scots are forking out thousands of pounds, some having to use personal savings or borrow from family members to pay for cataract procedures, hip and knee replacements and even rounds of chemotherapy. I hear what the Cabinet Secretary says, but actually is a lot of words that cover up the incompetence of this SNP government. So when will the Cabinet Secretary accept that after 18 years of the SNP in charge, Scots are faced with the reality of a two-tier health service in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I've set out, and I've always been candid with the challenges that our healthcare systems face here. These are not unique challenges to Scotland. They are unacceptable in anybody having to wait too long for their health care to be provided. But we know that the situation with regards to private health care utilisation in Scotland is much smaller than where other parts of the UK are concerned. So in England, for instance, when you combine the insurance-paid admission rate with the uptake of private health care, we are seeing 1,445 admissions per 100,000 in England. That compares to 902 in Scotland. These are facts that I know Jackie Baillie looks to distance herself from her Labour government's performance, but they are facts and a reality that demonstrate there are shared challenges across the UK in responding to the situation that arose during COVID. We have a plan to deliver for the people of Scotland, and we intend to deliver against it.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister questions. At question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Fiscal Commission conducts rigorous and independent analysis of tax and the economy in Scotland. Its most recent report outlines that SNP tax rises are costing Scottish workers £1.7 billion each year. So we should have an extra £1.7 billion to spend, but we don't, because the SFC identifies what it calls an economic performance gap with the rest of the UK. This actually reduces the amount available to spend. Does John Swinney know the size of the economic performance gap between SNP-run Scotland and the rest of the UK?
First Minister.
I think the important point to consider here is that the extra revenue that is raised as a consequence of the tax decisions that we have taken in Scotland enable us to invest in public services and in other interventions that support the government's policy agenda. And those changes and differences are, of course, well acknowledged and well understood within Scotland. As one example, we have a much more significant provision of early learning and childcare here in Scotland, which meets the needs of families. And in addition to that, the Scottish Child Payment helps to keep children out of poverty. And of course, in Scotland, we have a falling child poverty rate rather than in the rest of the United Kingdom, where child poverty rates are rising. So there are differences in policy outcomes that come from the decisions the government has made to ask people on higher incomes to pay slightly more in taxation.
Russell Finlay.
More smoke and mirrors from John Swinney, and he doesn't seem to know the figure, so let me help him. SNP tax rises in hard-working Scots should result in £1.7 billion more to spend. But because the SNP-run economy lags behind the rest of the UK, the Scottish Fiscal Commission says they only have £600 million more to spend. So under the SNP, there's a £1.1 billion economic performance gap. And that's just this year. Last year, it was another billion. Over the last 10 years, according to the SFC, the economic performance gap with the rest of the UK adds up to £5.4 billion. Does John Swinney now realise that anti-business SNP policies are costing Scotland a fortune?
First Minister.
I think what's clear from the data is that the improvements in GDP per capita in Scotland under this government, the Scottish Government, since we came to office, have been superior to those in the rest of the United Kingdom. That's what the data tells us, that the Scottish economy, in terms of GDP per capita, has grown at a faster rate in Scotland than in the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, of course, we take a number of steps as a government to invest in the economy. We are supporting the investment in key sectors of the economy, such as renewable energy. We are actively involved in investing in the skills system to support the development of the economy. And, of course, we assist companies by having a competitive business rates regime in Scotland, which reduces the burden of business rates on companies in Scotland, enabling them to invest in their business operations. That's what Scotland gets from the business-friendly SNP government.
Russell Finlay. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll just try and stop laughing for a minute. John Swinney doesn't even seem to accept the economic performance gap exists. It's peak SNP denial. The SFC are saying it. It's in here. The First Minister should try and read it. The SNP have failed to keep up with the rest of the UK. They've made it even worse by wasting billions of pounds of taxpayers' money on a national care service that doesn't treat patients, the endless Calmac ferry scandal, a £1 billion prison with bird and bat boxes, and an annual benefits bill that will soon top £9 billion. The SNP are costing Scotland £1 billion a year in lost growth and countless billions through their sheer incompetence. Isn't this exactly why John Swinney can't bring down bills or improve public services? He's thrown all the money away.
First Minister.
Well, just so that I can be clear to Mr Finlay, under the SNP government since 2007, GDP per person in Scotland has grown by 10.3% compared to 6.1% in the United Kingdom. So that demonstrates that we've had superior economic performance to the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, Russell Finlay, of course, highlights the fact that there are choices to be made about public expenditure. And when he talks about the annual benefits bill, I think he has to be explicit about what he's talking about. What benefits is he going to cut? Because what we believe is important is that we support children to be helped out of poverty. That's part of... Is that what Russell Finlay wants to stop? Does Russell Finlay... I think that's what we're now talking about. Russell Finlay wants to end the Scottish child payment and consign more children to poverty.
Let's hear one another.
Well, I'm simply pointing out, Presiding Officer, that there are implications of Mr Finlay saying things like the annual benefits bill is too high. He has to set out where the cuts are going to come from, and the cuts under Mr Finlay will fall on the children of Scotland. I want to lift children out of poverty. Mr Finlay wants to consign children to poverty.
Russell Finlay.
The Scottish Conservative Party wants to lift children and families out of poverty, not keep them trapped on benefits. The SNP waste money on an industrial scale, but unbelievably, Labour looked at the SNP's economic record and then decided to copy them. They've already raised national insurance, but there's more pain to come. The spending review signals a return to tax and spend. Rachel Reeves is shafting business, workers, farmers and the oil and gas industry. But there's at least enough money now for John Swinney to give Scots a tax break. So will he commit to bringing down the burden on Scottish workers and families?
First Minister.
I suppose there's one minor element of that question that I can find some common ground with, which is the damage that's been done to the economy by the decision to increase employers' national insurance contributions. Because we saw Well, we saw from the month of April in the GDP statistics this morning that there has been a contraction of GDP in the United Kingdom, down by 0.3%. Now, I think that could reasonably have been predicted from the increase in employers' national insurance contributions. Indeed, I warned about that. Because if we're going to have an agenda that's focused on growth, I do not understand why the UK Labour government took a decision to support a growth-reducing measure such as employers' national insurance contributions that the evidence now tells us is suppressing growth within the United Kingdom. So that's the context that we're now operating in. What I will say to Mr Finlay is this government will do what it always does. We'll focus on the needs of the people of Scotland. We'll focus on lifting children out of poverty. We'll focus on improving our public services. We'll focus on the journey to net zero, and we'll focus on improving the economic performance of Scotland, just like we've done in the past.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, members will be deeply concerned with the planned job losses at Alexander Dennis in Larbert. Our thoughts are with the workforce. Alexander Dennis is an industry leader in bus manufacturing, but this news was not inevitable. It is another result of SNP failure. Under the SNP, the Scottish Government is procuring more buses from China than they are from Scotland. Presiding Officer, Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham has bought almost 4 times as many buses from Alexander Dennis than the SNP government. That's shameful. So can I ask the First Minister, why do the SNP always put foreign businesses and manufacturers before Scotland's workers?
First Minister.
President, so before I come on to address the question that Mr Sarwar has put to me, may I take this opportunity, it's the first time I've had the opportunity since Parliament reconvened this week, to welcome Davy Russell to Parliament as the Member of the Scottish Parliament for Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, and wish him well. On the important question that Mr Sarwar puts to me about Alexander Dennis, I am deeply concerned about the situation, and this issue has been occupying a great deal of the focus and the attention of the Deputy First Minister and I and United Kingdom Government Ministers since we became aware of the situation over the last few weeks, and then ultimately to the decision that was announced yesterday. What the Scottish Government has done we've engaged with the company, and over a series of years we have supported Alexander Dennis in the development of their facility in Larbert and in Falkirk. We have assisted them in research and development activity, and indeed since 2020 Alexander Dennis has secured more zero-emission buses orders than any other single manufacturer through the Scottish Zero Emission Bus Challenge Fund and its predecessor, the Scottish Ultra Low Emission Bus Scheme. So we have, within the existing arrangements that are permissible, seen a situation where Alexander Dennis have secured more zero-emission bus orders than anybody else. Now, obviously, most bus orders are procured by private organisations in Scotland, run by commercial operators in a deregulated market, and any decisions that the Government is taking must be consistent with the Subsidy Control Act of the United Kingdom, which of course is a material issue in this issue. Having said all of that, I want to make it clear to the workforce at Alexander Dennis and to Parliament today that the Government is engaging very, very closely and firmly to see what we can do to help the situation and to avoid any of the negative implications that the announcement yesterday suggests might be the case.
Anna Sarwar.
That's a rather weak response from the First Minister, because if Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham can find a way within the existing legislation to procure more buses in Scotland, why can't the SNP government? It is another example of weak leadership from John Swinney. Because when Scotland needs buses, they buy from China. When Scotland needs steel for bridges, they buy from China. When we need ferries, they buy from Poland and Turkey, because all they want to do is manufacture grievance, and all they offer is waste and incompetence. They have the powers and they have the money, but as always, they want to blame someone else. Weak, failing leadership from John Swinney. And even his own MSPs are now openly rebelling against him. with senior figures saying he has 2 weeks. They groan in private, let them groan in public now, with senior figures saying he has 2 weeks to come up with a new idea to save his job. But, Presiding Officer, if he hasn't come up with a good idea to improve Scotland in 18 years, what chance has he got of coming up with something now?
First Minister.
Well, what I'm doing, and what the workforce of Alexander Dennis will not be surprised I'm doing, is that I'm focusing on the situation facing the workforce at Alexander Dennis. That's what I'm doing. So let me just tell Mr Sarwar what the government has done and what it's done over many years to support Alexander Dennis. We've provided £58 million of funding for zero-emission buses since 2020 through the Scottish Ultra Low Emission Bus Scheme. Scottish Enterprise has also supported Alexander Dennis with £30.3 million in research and development support as a contribution to their research and development activity. Now, that's been part of the partnership that's been undertaken between the Scottish Government and Alexander Dennis. Now, in his comments the other day, Paul Davis, the President and Managing Director of Alexander Dennis, said this, and it's about bus orders, and it's material to the answer I've just given Mr Sarwar. The stark reality is that current UK policy does not allow for the incentivisation or reward of local content, job retention and creation, nor does it encourage any domestic economic benefit. Now, that is the implication of the Subsidy Control Act. Now, what I am doing, what the Deputy First Minister is doing, this is what's commanding my attention and my focus just now, is how can we find a way in which we can remain legally compliant with the Subsidy Control Act and to enable these obstacles to be overcome. Now, in that endeavour, we are engaging very closely with the United Kingdom Government, and I welcome the fact that we have had engagement with the UK Government, and indeed, in a joint letter from the Secretary of State and the Deputy First Minister to the company, the Deputy First Minister and the Secretary of State say this: our governments continue to work closely together on a range of shared issues to support domestic industries in Scotland, and we are keen to work closely with Alexander Dennis at this challenging time. Now, that's us indicating that we are going to do everything we can to find a way through the Subsidy Control Act provisions so the government can continue to operate within the law, which we must do, but also we can support manufacturing in Scotland, which is my priority.
Anna Sarwar.
If John Swinney can't figure out a way to order buses in Scotland, I suggest he picks up the phone to Andy Burnham and see how he managed to do it almost 5 times as many bus orders from Manchester. John Swinney and the SNP are out of ideas, out of steam and out of time. Failing to support Scottish manufacturing jobs is just one example. After 18 years in charge, falling education standards, rising violent crime, a deepening NHS crisis, more lives lost to drug deaths and billions of pounds of wasted money. Everyday Scots pay the price for SNP incompetence and are expected to be thankful for it. So it's no wonder that, as shown in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, Scots are seeing through the spin and voting for a new direction. But it's not just the public, Presiding Officer. One SNP MSP said about John Swinney: there is no energy, no fire, no boldness, no long-term vision. They're right, aren't they?
First Minister.
Listen, Mr Sarwar can conjure up all the stuff he wants. He can go through his press cuttings. He can practice it in the mirror in the morning and see how it sounds. I'm going to be focused on delivering answers and solutions for workers who face difficulty in the country. And while Mr Sarwar postures, I'm going to deliver for the workers of Scotland.
Question number 3, Lorna Slater.
Kids can't learn if they're hungry. That's why the Greens campaigned for universal free school meals for P4 and P5 kids, and the further expansion to P6 and P7 kids whose families receive the Scottish Child Payment. It's why we brought the next phase of rollout to S1, S2 and S3 kids receiving SCP to budget negotiations. In August, thousands more high school kids in Aberdeen, Glasgow, Fife, Murray, North Ayrshire, South Lanarkshire, Shetland and the Western Isles will now get free school meals. Does the First Minister agree that this programme must be expanded to all council areas as soon as possible to ensure that no kid goes hungry in school.
First Minister.
I unreservedly accept the importance of the issue of food provision in our schools and tackling the issue of children who come to school hungry, and to make sure that they have a good and solid meal during the day is addressed as part of the Government's policy programme. So there's no disagreement between Lorna Slater and I on that question. The Government's taken pragmatic decisions within the finances available to us to expand the programme to primary 6 and 7 pupils who are eligible for the Scottish Child Payment, and we're obviously taking forward the pilot exercises for secondary pupils that were the subject of constructive dialogue with the Green Party during the budget negotiations. So I'm committed to doing as much as we can. Parliament will be familiar, of course, with the financial challenges that we faced, which were not eased by the spending review yesterday, but we will, of course, engage constructively with other parties about how we can take forward these commitments, which are important to enhance the educational opportunities of children and young people in Scotland.
Lorna Slater.
Expanding free school meals is one way to build the fairer, greener country we know that Scotland can be. But children in Scotland will still be forced into poverty thanks to a Labour government balancing the books on the backs of the poorest, while the wealthiest grow ever richer. The UK government could have scrapped the cruel two-child benefit cap this week. They didn't. Scotland is tired of mitigating Westminster's mistakes. Does the First Minister agree that now is the time to demand that Keir Starmer set out exactly what conditions he believes need to be met to trigger an independence referendum for Scotland so we can get out of this unequal union?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I agree with Lorna Slater about the importance of Scotland becoming an independent country. And I think it's unacceptable democratically.
Let's hear one another.
I think it's unacceptable democratically for the will of this Parliament, which has demanded the power to be able to hold a referendum on independence, is ignored by the United Kingdom Government. I think that is democratically unacceptable. So I agree entirely with Lorna Slater on this point. And if anyone needs to have an explanation about why Scotland would benefit from being an independent country, it comes in the fact that we are about to see, and it was confirmed yesterday, that the spending review is predicated on there being an attack on the poorest and the most vulnerable in our society by a Labour government. So anyone that was thinking that attacks on the poor and the vulnerable in our society were an exclusive preserve of the Conservative Party got a rude awakening yesterday, because it's also the preserve of the Labour Party into the bargain. So the answer to the seesaw politics of attacking the poor and the vulnerable by Westminster is for Scotland to be an independent country, and the sooner that happens, the better.
Question number 4, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the impact on Scotland will be of the Chancellor's Spending Review 2025.
First Minister.
President, the UK Government Spending Review has left Scotland facing real terms growth of 0.8% a year for our overall block grant funding, lower than the 1.5% average for UK departments. Had our day-to-day resource funding grown in line with overall UK Government spending, we would have over £1.1 billion more to spend on our priorities by 2028-29. This all comes on top of the additional hike in employers' national insurance contributions and planned cuts in support for disabled people. These are the realities of the spending review that need to be understood within Scotland today.
Absolutely. Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. In April, the UK economy shrank by 0.3%, over £712 million, following the devastating impact of Labour's increase in employment national insurance contributions, a blatant jobs tax. Across the UK, 276,000 jobs have been lost since Labour's October budget, with another 109,000 expected in May. And annual UK debt interest payments now stand over £133 billion, £2,000 for every man, woman and child in the UK. Amidst this economic mismanagement, can the First Minister say what will be the impact on Scotland's economy of lower than average funding over the next 3 years relative to UK departments, with Scotland being short-changed by £1,100 million over the next 3 years?
First Minister.
So the implications of the spending review are that the real terms growth in the Scottish Block Grant will be 0.8% a year, but it is lower than the 1.5% average for UK departments. Now, that demonstrates the scale of the financial challenge that we face in Scotland. Now, the Government will have to respond to that. We will have to address those issues as part of the medium-term financial strategy, the spending review and the budget for successive years. But what it demonstrates is that the United Kingdom is not providing the sustained investment in public services that are required as a consequence of the years of austerity. We need to invest to grow, and that was not delivered by the spending review yesterday.
Question number 5, Liam Kerr.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's position is on whether the Home Leave for Prisoners system is operating appropriately and as intended.
First Minister.
Management and decisions relating to home leave is an operational matter for the Scottish Prison Service. All decisions are subject to robust risk assessment and risk management planning. If released, individuals are subject to licence conditions and can be recalled to custody if these are breached. The use of home leave and temporary release are a well-established and necessary part of preparing an individual for eventual release and reintegration to the community.
Liam Kerr.
Really? Well, a year into a 4-year sentence for repeatedly subjecting Demi Hanaway to appalling mental and physical abuse, even while she was pregnant, violent thug Andrew Brown will get home leave, with 1 week a month out of prison. Demi's mum, Helen, said, "We had not been consulted or warned. The very thought that we could have walked right into him has left us sickened to our stomachs. A violent monster like Brown should not be walking the streets just a year after being sentenced to almost 4 years." So is the First Minister seriously telling Helen that home leave is working as intended? And if not, how will he change it?
First Minister.
As I indicated in the earlier answer, the management and decisions relating to home leave is an operational matter for the Scottish Prison Service. You have to make careful judgments about each individual cases. Now, I think it's Mr Kerr has put information into the parliamentary discussion just now. I understand that the individual in question has not been granted home leave, but has had unescorted day release, which is a different concept in the process. Now, as I have indicated before in Parliament, the case that involves Demi Hanaway is a tragic case, and I express my sympathies to Demi's family. I will explore the details of the issues that Mr Kerr has put on the record today to determine if there is any further action or intervention that can be taken, subject to respecting the operational independence of the Scottish Prison Service to arrive at these judgments. And of course, I do put on the record that the Lord Advocate has instructed an investigation into the circumstances of Demi's death, and that is underway.
Claire Baker.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. As the First Minister is aware, I have raised the case of Demi Hanaway in the Chamber before, and as he recognises, the Lord Advocate has instructed a fresh investigation into Demi's death, which does include the role that Andrew Brown has possibly played in Demi's death. So does he share my concerns about the decision on home leave, and also how can we maintain the integrity of the current investigation if Andrew Brown is allowed on home leave and is looking at release date for February?
First Minister.
I think the issues, the processes are distinct processes, and the Lord Advocate's examination and exploration that she has requested will be undertaken independently of any other processes, and I can't prejudge where that investigation and scrutiny may lead. It would be Claire Baker will understand. I can't intervene in the actions of the Lord Advocate in this respect. We'll take away the issue that Claire Baker raises with me about any interconnection between those two different processes, one of which is undertaken by the Scottish Prison Service, one of which is undertaken independently of ministers by under the supervision of the Lord Advocate. And if there is anything further that I can advise Claire Baker about, I acknowledge her long-standing interest in this case, I will do so. But I think the most I can say at this moment is that these are two independent processes that are being undertaken. But if there is any appropriate connection to be established, I will make sure that is the case.
Question number 6, Foysol Choudhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government is working to ensure that patients are accurately informed of waiting times for NHS treatments following referrals to a specialist.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, we recognise the importance of transparent and regular communication with parents, which is why we have in place a standard package of communications that all health boards should be providing. Our revised waiting times guidance, published in December 2023, ensures that patients are provided with clear communications throughout their care journey, setting out what they should expect while they are waiting for their appointment, test or treatment. To assist patients in accessing waiting time information prior to treatment, Public Health Scotland offers an online platform with initial planned care waiting times indicating the typical wait durations over the past quarter.
Foysol Choudhury.
Thank the First Minister for the answer. It's been over a year since my constituent was referred to a dermatologist. He doesn't know when he will be seen. His skin condition and mental health are getting worse. In NHS Lothian, the number of people waiting over 52 weeks to see a dermatologist has doubled in the last year. Will the First Minister admit that his government has lost control of waiting times for specialist care, and will he apologise to my constituent?
First Minister.
As I've made clear on a number of occasions, there are individuals who are waiting too long for treatment. There are many people treated tenuously within the National Health Service, but there are many people that are waiting too long. And I regret and I apologise for the fact that people are waiting too long. We are trying to recover services as quickly as we can from the COVID pandemic, and that has the focus of the Government. Now, Mr Choudhury raises with me specifically the issue of dermatology services. The Government is introducing and is rolling out a digital dermatology service involving all GP practices in the country, with the aim of reducing the waiting times that individuals are waiting for dermatology processes by improving the flow of cases and the handling of cases as part of the reforms that we are undertaking. So I assure Mr Choudhury that those issues are being progressed by the Government with the aim of addressing the issue that he puts to me today.
Brief supplementary, Joe Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The issue Mr Choudhury raises is really important. So can the First Minister say more about what the Scottish Government is doing to reduce waiting times for my constituents in Dundee and across the country? And can he specifically give us an update on recent targeted investment and how that is supporting delivery?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, in the last financial year we invested an additional £30 million to drive action to address the longest waits. We expected that would deliver 64,000 appointments and procedures, but it in fact delivered 105,500 appointments and procedures. For the year ahead, more than £106 million of additional funding has been assigned to speciality waits, where it can have the greatest impact against the longest waits. That will enable us to deliver over 150,000 extra appointments and procedures in the coming year, which will ensure people receive the care they need as quickly as possible.
Brief supplementary, Sandish Gulhani.
Thank you, and a declaration of interest as a practising NHS GP. I was contacted by John, who has already waited 40 weeks for orthopaedic surgery. He's had no updates from the Health Board. He looked himself and found his wait increasing, starting at 52 weeks in September and now 67. The uncertainty is a major source of frustration and pain. So, First Minister, after reading out what is not happening, and at a time we can track our online orders to the minute, why is there no transparency for waiting times for hospital appointments?
First Minister.
Well, I think the information is available about the length of waits, and Mr Choudhury has put information to me about the visibility of that information. and Dr Gohani has just done likewise. So that information is available, and I'm indicating to Parliament these long waits are unacceptable. That's why the focus of our intervention is about addressing those long waits and ensuring that people do not wait as long as Dr Gohani puts to me in the case that he raises with me. So the Government is absolutely focused on reducing those long waits. I want to see more progress being undertaken. It is the basis of regular dialogue between the Health Secretary and I and the leadership of the National Health Service. All boards are seized of this importance, and I reiterate that today.
Thank you. There is a particularly high level of interest in supplementary questions across the Chamber today. I'd be grateful for concise questions and responses, and I call Michael Matheson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of the deep concern in my constituency at the announcement made by Alexander Dennis yesterday. Given the risk posed to over 400 jobs in my constituency, having listened to the exchanges earlier in the Chamber, the last thing the workforce in my constituents need is for their future employment to be simply turned into a political football. Indeed, they deserve much better. Now more than ever, the workforce need the Scottish and UK Government to work together to prevent the closure of the Camlin and the Larbert sites. These jobs are not yet lost, and everything should be done to secure them for the future. Bus manufacturing has taken place in Camlin for over 100 years. It's part of the local community's DNA. Well, I've listened to the exchanges so far. Can I ask the First Minister if he would commit to 2 points in taking these forward with the UK Government? To look at maximising the potential for new orders across the UK for ADL in the weeks and months ahead, and secondly, to address the fundamental point that the company have highlighted, and that is the uneven playing field that they are facing in competing with overseas manufacturers as a result of the Subsidy Act. It needs to be addressed if we're to secure these jobs, and I'd ask the First Minister to do so.
First Minister.
President Officer, I entirely understand the deep concern of Mr Matheson about the implications for Alexander Dennis in his constituency. He has been assiduous over all of his time in Parliament in supporting the company and in enabling and supporting its development. As I indicated in my earlier answers, we have had a number of programmes of investment in Alexander Dennis. I hope that gives Mr Matheson assurance of the Government's commitment. We have also seen bus orders undertaken and delivered by Alexander Dennis, but the company have highlighted to us the significant restrictions in the current competitive climate because of the implications of the Subsidy Control Act on the ability for public sector procurement to be able to take account of local content, job retention and job creation. Now, these are issues that we are exploring with the United Kingdom Government, and I give Mr Matheson the absolute assurance that the Government enters into this consultation determined to safeguard the future of employment in his constituency.
Graham Simpson.
There have been various funds from the Scottish Government to help bus companies buy electric buses. One of them was launched by Michael Matheson, and that money, our money, has gone to buy Chinese buses. And some of us were warning years ago that this would end in tears. And that's where we've got to. So the First Minister says there's a problem with the Subsidy Control Act. Yes, there is. But we've known about that for years. Why is he only now wanting to do something about it?
First Minister.
President Officer, I am trying to handle this issue, as my answers have given today, in a way that is not making any party political remarks. But I have to point out to Mr Simpson that the Subsidy Control Act was legislated for by the Conservative Government in the United Kingdom. It is UK legislation that we are obliged by law to follow. I cannot act in a fashion out with the provisions of the law because I will just not be enabled to do so. I will not have a legal basis for acting in that fashion. So there are ways in which we can work with the United Kingdom Government to try to address that issue. That's the spirit that we have entered into on this issue. Deputy First Minister has discussed it with the Secretary of State for Scotland. I've discussed these issues with the company, and we will be doing everything we can to try to address this situation.
Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, will the Scottish Government request that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service reconsider its plans to close Marianville Fire Station in light of the recent fire at Cableswind in Leith, the community petition, which has now got over 3,500 signatures, and reports that plans like this would weaken fire services in Edinburgh and the Lothians, while our fire services are under increasing pressure, for example from wildfires like we saw last month in West Lothian?
First Minister.
President Officer, obviously this is an issue that is within the responsibility of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and I'm not clear in my own mind at what stage the Marianville proposal is at, but in general the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service delivery review includes 23 options for change, which will be the subject of a full public consultation which commences at the end of this month. Now, I don't know if I would imagine that the proposal that Sarah Boyack is putting to me is part of that process. It will be subject to the dialogue within that consultation. As I answered a question a few weeks ago, which I think was from Rachel Hamilton, the Fire and Rescue Service must be mindful of the demand for intervention, for the pattern of activity that places demands on its services in coming to any operational decisions. And there will be the full opportunity for the points that Sarah Boyack has made to be considered by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service.
Bob Doris.
Presiding Officer, a constituent of mine is a displaced Ukrainian national as a consequence of Putin's illegal war. The researcher at Glasgow University, whose post will end shortly, efforts to secure a new post are hampered by a work visa which expires in October next year. Whilst an extension has been applied for, they will be currently losing out on job opportunities. She wishes certainty for her and her daughter, who is excelling at Clevedon Secondary School. Will the First Minister get the Scottish Government to contact the Home Office to ensure that not only my constituent but also other displaced Ukrainian nationals in Scotland get the certainty they need to continue to live and work here?
First Minister.
So it's an important point that Mr Doris puts to me, and I'll ask the Minister for Equalities to discuss the specific case with Mr Doris to obtain the details and to make those representations to the United Kingdom Government. Of course, the point that Mr Doris raises will have wider application within Scotland. There will be many individuals who are here on temporary arrangements as a consequence of the illegal invasion of Ukraine. Scotland has welcomed those individuals. They make a huge contribution to our society, and there is a general issue that will affect individuals where clarity would be beneficial. So I will ensure that the Minister is in touch with Mr Doris, and we will make representations about that case and the wider issue to the UK Government.
Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After over 4 decades of tireless work, Clydebank Women's Aid in my region of Western Bartonshire will be shutting down. Western Bartonshire has the second highest rate of domestic abuse in Scotland, with 153 incidents per 10,000 people. We must not underestimate the excellent work these organisations do by acting as a lifeline for many survivors. I have been contacted by many constituents and organisations. This decision will have an enormous and devastating impact on the local community. Can I ask the First Minister what support will the Scottish Government be providing to organisations helping survivors of domestic abuse so that they can continue on the good work they do, especially as domestic abuse cases are rising in Scotland?
First Minister.
Of course, I'm sorry to hear about the information that Pam Gossel set out about Clydebank Women's Aid. The Government has, of course, taken a number of steps to legislate to take action on domestic abuse, not least of which the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act 2018, which created a specific offence of domestic abuse that incorporates coercive and controlling behaviour. The Delivering Equally Safe Fund provides £21.6 million this year to 115 projects focused on preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls. Those projects will be available across the country to make sure that there is support in communities the length and breadth of Scotland to assist women who are facing domestic abuse. And obviously, I want to make sure, and I will take the opportunity after this question time to make sure that there is relevant and appropriate access in the Clydebank area for support under this funding scheme.
Katie Clark.
Enabled care workers are on strike and have been demonstrating outside this Parliament today. Scottish care worker pay is being raised to £12.60 per hour this year. Does the First Minister agree that enabled care workers deserve a minimum wage of £15 per hour now?
First Minister.
Presiding, I greatly value, and the Government greatly values, the vital role that social care workers play in delivering high-quality care services across Scotland. Pay negotiations are a matter for trade unions and employers, and I would urge both parties to work together to reach an agreement which is fair for the workforce and affordable for Enable, and I would encourage that to be the case.
David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what assessment the Scottish Government has made of the impact that recent changes to funding allocations by the Scottish Funding Council will have on Fife College's ability to deliver high-quality education and training opportunities.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, colleges play a vital role in our communities, and that's why the budget allocation for this year sees a 2.1% uplift to the college resource allocation. It's important to be clear that the Funding Council has ensured no college will see a reduction in teaching funding in this financial year compared to the last financial year. Fife College will be receiving a 1.26% increase in teaching funding and a 4.9% increase in capital maintenance funding in the final allocations. And of course, Fife College will be moving into new facilities in the Dunfermline Learning Campus next year, which have been supported by tens of millions of pounds of Scottish Government investment. Operational decisions, including course provision and staffing, are of course a matter for individual colleges, and I hope this answer provides Mr Torrance with some of the context around the final decisions that have been made.
Douglas Lumsden.
Presiding Officer, the First Minister will know that Scott Beef in Inverurie has shut its doors with a loss of 90 jobs. This is a devastating blow to families affected and also the farming in general in the North East. So will the First Minister join me in meeting with members of the farming community in the North East to hear their concerns on how this latest closure will affect them?
First Minister.
I'm concerned to hear about that decision, and obviously the Government will make available support through the Partnership Action for Continuing Employment to the employees who may well face redundancy and an impact. I'm very happy for the Agriculture Minister, Jim Fairley, to meet with Mr Lumsden and his constituents to discuss this issue.
Aaron Adam.
Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week marks Carers Week, and this afternoon I'm hosting a roundtable in Parliament to discuss the Family Fund's new report, The Cost of Caring 2025, and the urgent challenges it highlights for families raising disabled and seriously ill children. With this in mind, can I ask the First Minister what action is his government taking to better support carers across Scotland?
First Minister.
So we take a number of actions to support the invaluable role of carers within our society. We are investing over £88 million per year in local carer support through Local Authority Carers Act funding. Unpaid carers will be up to £4,400 better off by the end of 2025 due to the introduction of Carers Allowance Supplement in 2018, with over £330 million in payments to date, a payment that's only available here in Scotland. Through the Care Reform Bill passed this week, we will establish a right to breaks from caring to support carers' health and well-being. And ahead of that being introduced, we've introduced increased funding for voluntary sector short breaks to £13 million, which includes £2.2 million to the Family Fund's Take a Break Scotland programme for parent carers. That's alongside £2.9 million this year for Family Fund's Scotland Grant programme for families on a low income raising a disabled child. So I hope that gives Can Adam some confidence that the Government is standing with carers and recognising the invaluable contribution they make to our society today.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Colin Smith. There will now be a short suspension to allow the public gallery and the chamber to clear.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.